It all started when I moved into a new house, a quaint little place in a quiet neighborhood. The previous owners had left in a hurry, but I didn't think much of it. It was an old house, full of character, with a creaky wooden staircase in a basement that had been converted into a storage area. The house had a certain charm to it, with its vintage wallpaper and old-fashioned fixtures. I was excited to make it my own. The first few days were uneventful as I busied myself with unpacking and settling in. However, it wasn't long before I began to notice odd occurrences. It started with small things. Objects would be moved, lights would flicker, and I would hear strange noises at night. I brushed it off as the house settling or my imagination running wild in an unfamiliar place. One evening, I was in the basement, sorting through boxes of old books and knickknacks. The basement had a musty smell, and the only light came from a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. As I reached for a box, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. It was colder than usual, and the air felt thick and oppressive. I tried to shake off the feeling and continued with my task. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. I told myself it was just a shadow cast by the dim light and went back to work. But the uneasy feeling lingered, and I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched. Over the next few days, the occurrences became more frequent. I would hear whispers when I was alone in the house, and objects would be moved or misplaced. One night, as I was heading to bed, I heard a loud thump coming from the basement. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made my way downstairs. The basement was dark and silent, but as I shone the flashlight around, I saw the shadow again. This time, it was clearer. A tall, dark figure standing in the corner. I froze, unable to move or speak. The figure seemed to be watching me, its presence filling the room with a sense of dread. I backed away slowly, my heart racing, and ran upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. The next day, I decided to investigate the history of the house. I discovered that a previous owner had died under mysterious circumstances in the basement. Desperate for answers, I called a paranormal investigator. When they arrived, they set up equipment and began their investigation. As they asked questions, the air grew colder, and the shadowy figure appeared again, this time more menacing. The investigator captured the presence on camera, confirming my worst fears. The investigator explained that the spirit was likely tied to the house due to unfinished business or a traumatic event. They recommended I cleanse the house and seek spiritual help. After a thorough cleansing and several rituals, the occurrences stopped. The atmosphere in the house felt lighter, and the sense of dread was gone. However, even now, years later, I can still feel the lingering presence in the basement, a reminder of the shadow that once haunted my home. I rarely go down there, and when I do, I always feel as if I'm being watched. It's a chilling reminder that some things are beyond our understanding, and that the past can sometimes reach out and touch the present in the most unsettling ways. When I was a child, my grandmother gave me an old porcelain doll. It was beautiful, with delicate features and a lovely dress. She told me it had been in our family for generations and was very special. I loved the doll and kept it on a shelf in my room, proud of its elegance and history. As I grew older, strange things started happening around the doll. At first they were small, almost insignificant. I would find it in different positions than where I left it, and sometimes it seemed to be staring at me with its glassy eyes. I began to feel uneasy around it, but I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. It was a family heirloom after all, and I cherished the connection to my grandmother. One night I woke up to the sound of whispering. It was soft, almost inaudible, but it was there. I looked around my room and saw the doll sitting on my desk, even though I was sure I had left it on the shelf. Its eyes seemed to follow me as I moved, and I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I picked it up and put it back on the shelf, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next day I asked my grandmother about the doll. She hesitated before telling me that it had belonged to a distant relative who was said to be a witch. The doll was believed to be cursed, bringing misfortune to those who possessed it. My grandmother had never believed in the curse, but I was starting to. She advised me to treat the doll with respect and not to provoke it. That night, I had a nightmare. In the dream, the doll came to life and attacked me, its porcelain face twisted into a malevolent grin. I woke up in a cold sweat, only to find the doll on my bed, its hand resting on my chest. I screamed and threw it across the room. My parents rushed in, but when I tried to explain, they dismissed it as a bad dream. Determined to get rid of it, I took the doll to the backyard and buried it deep in the ground. I hoped that would be the end of it, but the nightmares continued. I would dream of the doll digging its way out of the ground, its eyes filled with hatred. I felt helpless and terrified, unsure of what to do. One night, I woke up to find dirt and small pieces of porcelain on my bed. The doll had somehow dug its way out and returned to my room. I was petrified and didn't know what to do. In desperation, I called a local priest, who agreed to come and bless the house. The priest arrived the next day and immediately sensed the dark energy surrounding the doll. He performed a cleansing ritual, using holy water and prayers to banish the evil spirit. As he prayed, the doll seemed to writhe and twist, as if fighting against the exorcism. Finally, the priest declared the ritual complete and instructed me to burn the doll to ensure it would never return. As the doll burned, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The air in the house felt lighter, and the sense of dread that had plagued me for so long was gone. The nightmares stopped, and I finally felt safe in my own home again. Years later, I still remember the terror of that cursed doll and the way it seemed to have a life of its own. It left a lasting impact on me, a reminder that some things are better left untouched, and that there are forces in this world beyond our understanding. Whenever I see a porcelain doll, I can't help but feel a shiver of fear, a reminder of the dark presence that once haunted my life. Every summer, my friends and I would rent a cabin deep in the woods for a weekend getaway. It was our favorite tradition, a chance to disconnect from the world and enjoy nature. One year, we found a cabin that seemed perfect, secluded with a beautiful view of the lake and surrounded by dense forest. It was a bit older than our usual choices, but the rustic charm was irresistible. The first night was peaceful. We roasted marshmallows by the fire, shared stories, and enjoyed the quiet serenity of the woods. As we were getting ready for bed, we heard a strange noise coming from the woods. It sounded like whispering, but we couldn't make out any words. We laughed it off, attributing it to the wind rustling through the trees or perhaps some nocturnal animals, and went to sleep. The next day we went hiking and spent the day exploring the beautiful surroundings. As evening approached, we returned to the cabin, tired but happy. That night the whispering was louder, and it seemed to be coming from all around us. We tried to ignore it, but it was unsettling, and a sense of unease settled over us. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my window. I peered out, but saw nothing. I decided to check on my friends and found them all awake, having heard the same noises. We decided to stay together in the living room, hoping the noises would stop if we were all together. Suddenly, the front door burst open and a cold wind swept through the cabin. The lights flickered, and we saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, her face pale and eyes hollow. She looked at us with a sorrowful expression before vanishing into thin air. We were frozen with fear, unable to comprehend what we had just seen. Terrified, we decided to leave the cabin immediately. As we were packing, we found an old diary in one of the drawers. It belonged to a woman named Emily, who had lived in the cabin years ago. The diary detailed how she had lost her husband in a tragic accident and had died of a broken heart, alone in the cabin. The final entries were filled with despair and loneliness, and it was clear she had never moved on. Feeling a deep sadness for Emily, we decided to perform a small ceremony to honor her memory before we left. We gathered by the lake, said a few words, and placed the diary in the water, hoping to bring her some peace. As we drove away, the whispering stopped, and the air felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. We never returned to that cabin, but the memory of Emily's ghostly presence haunts us to this day. Every summer when we gather for our annual trip, we tell the story of the haunted cabin by the lake. It serves as a reminder of the sadness that can linger and the spirits that remain tied to places of sorrow and loss.